Here's how it is, man. We're the police. We come in here, we ask questions, we canvass areas. We politely do our job, you know. Now, I got some questions about Jessica Trimble. Either I'm gonna arrest you and take you downtown, or you're gonna talk to me now.
It's a story about a troubled Memphis detective who tracks down the hardest cases, the worst killers and murderers. Along the way, we kind of discover why he doesn't show any mercy and why he uses such brutal methods, because of something that happened in his childhood. It's a very dark place, and he's still really governed by those events in a way, as a man, as a grown-up.
Well, I think the thing that motivates him is a combination of his childhood and the way his brother was murdered when he was young, and the determination that he developed as a child to become one of the greatest homicide detectives in the world.
Along the way, during the movie, what happens is his methods come into question by an FBI agent who looks at one of his cases, something that bounced out of the courts.
Were you there when King made the arrest?
All right, look, this guy's a real piece of work. A vet who was dishonorably discharged after Desert Storm. He's trained as a medic, but also as a small arms and explosives expert. You can't be thinking this guy's gonna walk.
He already has. It wasn't our call. The witness refused to testify and the Supreme Court overturned it. They found the excessive force used by Detective King unconstitutional and the DNA evidence to be suspect.
That animal should be put to death.
Right.
She's a little bit suspicious of him and why he seems to be so fantastic at, what he does. So she's not only investigating the case at hand, but investigating him as well.
And I'm a police officer in Louisiana, and I have been for 18 years or so. They have recently allowed me to start working homicide. Some of the cases that I've studied, and one particular was Zodiac, who to this day has never been caught, but there have been other people who were kind of astrology freaks who seemed to hide a lot of their activity and clues that they left behind in astrology.
It's quite an interesting topic that they've picked because he deals with a lot of symbology and astrological symbols.
The lacerations around the neck there.
Looks like he was choked with a garrote. Good Lord have mercy. See the comment on the hand? That's a Sasquatch quadrate. It's a forewarning to back off. 2 murders in 2 days. Our man's on the move.
I did read a lot of books on magic and astrology, and there's some weird people who believe a lot of weird things. Lazarus, the way I've approached it, he believes that he's doing something good, that he has a mission, and he has something to accomplish. And he's into magic and Satanism, and so what he does is more of a ritual, and he uses people as objects for his ritual. It's not so much about killing as it is the spilling of blood.
I've always been extremely interested in homicide and solving murder cases, and I always thought how interesting it would be to have a homicide detective who's one of the best in the world who could possibly be a serial killer or a bad guy.
All of a sudden he finds himself under suspicion. That starts turning his life upside down. At the same time, one of the killers that he's chasing turns it around and starts setting him up for a fall.
This guy leaves markers everywhere, and he's always leaving weird little symbols, and so Jacob primarily is trying to break the code and put it all together to figure out, okay, where's the next kill? So they're putting that together, and I'm kind of eavesdropping. I obviously don't trust him. And he has a scratch on his arm, which later comes into play in a huge way that kind of points the finger possibly in his direction.
Close, baby. There's a constellation called Ariadne's Crown. It has 9 stars in it. I I believe these stars somehow correlate to the locations of the killings. I just need to figure out how.
Stephen's character is an investigative detective. I think he specializes in the serial killers and really bad guys like my character, Billy Joe.
Well, I think Billy Joe's a very, very sick guy. He's just sort of the ultimate evil in the sense that he is not happy unless he's torturing people. And so I tried to create characters that the audience wouldn't mind me being terrible to because they themselves are so abominable, you know.
Yeah, Storm's relationship with Jacob, we go way back. You know, we've been working together and solving, you know, some really tough crimes and some gruesome crimes, you know, for some years now. When Frankie comes on, you know, she's FBI and she's kind of coming over to take over the case, you know, kind of supervise it away from, you know, Jacob and I. And obviously we're not happy about that.
This is Frankie Miller. She's FBI.
I've been assigned to look into the Grifter case.
Grifter. Damn the press and their nicknames.
Jacob know about this?
You listen to me. I'm giving this woman permission to go wherever or speak to whoever she needs.
King's got a hell of a track record. We're just interested in seeing how he does it.
Frankie Miller is, she's a bit of a newbie. She's never really been around anything quite as gritty as these police officers, but she's incredibly intelligent. She's very well put together, she's very well composed, and yeah, she's tough. She hasn't really gotten her feet wet yet in terms of the experience. So there are some things that definitely throw her off guard a little bit.
Lazarus is kind of a genius who seeks out a genius homicide detective to catch him because he wants to be caught by someone, you know, worthy of his IQ.
All my life, I searched for a worthy adversary. Someone who understands me. Someone who appreciates my work. You're that one.
You think?
I've played a lot of these sorts of characters. A lot of them are just like children. So if you put yourself in the mindset of a child who doesn't get what they want, and you give them an adult body and adult power, it's pretty easy. They're not that sick and that twisted. They do things, but really their motives are quite simple. The recipe for a serial killer. You see people in day-to-day life dealing with their rage and their emotions in different ways. These guys just sort of play them out on a larger canvas. You just spend time imagining what it's like. I mean, you just carry your thoughts. If somebody cuts you off in traffic, what would it be like if I followed that person home and I cut off their skin and I made a lamp out of it?
One of the things that happens when you go through the process of directing a movie is you discover what about it you didn't learn from prep. And what I didn't learn about Mark's character was that there's something really dark about him that we don't see until quite late in the movie. And so I was looking for a way to add something visually to a sequence that was kind of presentational. It was about how he gets out of prison and kills his lawyers. And so I got a handheld camera and put the actors in the car, his lawyers, who he's going to kill, and turned it to 12 frames. And we sat there in the car and just gushed blood on Mark with bottles, and people were throwing it from straws and brushes off camera, and just kept dousing him in blood as he was going and killing these guys over and over. I just kept saying, keep stabbing, keep stabbing. And he did that, and I think by the time he got to the end of doing all that stabbing and being that covered with blood, I think he actually sort of was like, he could have killed somebody right in that moment. And I think when he got out of the car and everybody looked at him, I think he realized how he looked. It wasn't just that he was covered in blood, but he looked like he was going to kill somebody.
There are several scenes in Billy Joe where he does some very ugly things to some people, you know. He has a lust for blood, and I think he enjoys getting away with it and watching it go down. Mean guy, very mean. I'm evil.
read the script, I thought it was a nice twist. It was a little different from some of the things that Steven's done. And I think that it's a great character, you know, in the way that he has to decipher these symbols and deal with a lot of mysticism and things, which is the kind of thing that I like.
This is not a typical Steven Seagal movie as I had experienced them. And I had seen a bunch of his work, but not everything. It wasn't what I expected, because it was a thriller. So that interested me right away. And it was very atmospheric, which I also didn't expect. So I felt like it would give me an opportunity to do some interesting storytelling.
Well, I try to make sure that everybody in the movie is good enough to help the movie.
We went through a long process of casting, star casting, but at the end of the day, number one on the call sheet, Steven Seagal. So we had a green light movie. It was just a question of how good a cast we could assemble around him, sort of piece by piece, and found Holly Deneau to play Frankie. And that role was originally written for a man. And as we're going through the casting process, I asked Laura Brooke, as the casting director, to bring in some women to read for it, because I thought that it might give that character a little different dimension.
Detective King, Frankie Miller, FBI.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Yeah, you know, folks downtown told me you'd be coming, and they kind of wanted me to cooperate, you know.
Well, I'm not here to get in the way, mostly observe, possibly offer some of my own expertise.
I'd love some of your expertise, you know, because I can see at your age, you probably got a lot more expertise than we do.
It's cool, the idea that you send off the tape and Steven Seagal is sitting in his hotel room watching it. I don't know if that's how it really went down. I'm assuming he maybe had some of his people look at it, but, you know, yeah, it's flattering.
Steven called me. I saw Steven in Nashville. He was playing a gig with his band. I don't know if you've heard the band or not, they're great. And we talked for some time when we would see each other in passing. And he said he had a character that he wanted me to look at. And he sent me the script, and here I am. I'll have to say Billy Joe's the most equal character in my short-lived film history so far.
Chris Thomas King is, perfect for the role of Storm. So we really brought the South here,
Chris Thomas King, he said, I'd love for Chris to play Storm. I thought that was terrific because I had seen Brother, Wherefore Art Thou, and I had seen Ray, and I knew who he was.
I was worried about meeting whoever it was that was going to play Storm, because Storm's character is actually really mean and really crass and vulgar to my character. I was like, I hope it's not some guy that takes the role a little too seriously. So Chris is the complete opposite of that, and he's a sweetheart. He's easy peasy.
Karen, who was a very beautiful actress who was playing Celine, she, she looks like a Creole, black woman from the South. And so, naturally Storm is going to be attracted, whether it was in the script or not,
You staying?
Nah, I hate the smell when they pop the lip. You girls have a blast. If it gets too strong in here, crack a window.
There were a lot of challenges to this script, mostly because it had a lot of scenes and a lot of locations, and Steven's character was in 90 of the 110 scenes, which logistically is difficult because all the action and all the scenes that he's in had to be scheduled in a really good way so that we could execute the movie in the 25 days that we had to shoot it in. For me, pre-visualizing scenes and sequences is very helpful. I find as a director, it gives me some insight into the dynamic of the scene. So the storyboards are kind of like a good guideline. They aren't the absolute. In the action sequences, they're a little bit more of an absolute, except that Steven would always come in with a great idea and say, I want to do this today, or I have an idea for that, or I feel like doing this. And so again, they became kind of a jumping off point. They're also good because it lets everyone on the key team have an idea of what you have in mind, even if it's not the absolute end point of what's going to be executed.
Man, I think he's a gentleman and a very prepared director, very intelligent man. He's probably the best director I've worked with, and it's been the best experience for me.
The first couple of days of a new movie, you know, like every director, you know, every lead actor has a different way of working. And he has a lot of respect for, you know, the talent on the set, you know, not just the leading actors, you know, but, you know, anyone who steps into his world, you know, from extras or whatever, he respects everyone. And when you do that, it's genuine, but that helps coax out the best performances, you know, from the people that he's working with. Just from what I've seen on the monitors and the way they tell me they're going to tweak the coloring, you know, in the editing, you know, in the post-production, I think the movie is going to look much bigger.
I've had a lot of experience as a writer and a producer, and editing is the last opportunity that you have to rewrite the script. And so for me, the process of cutting with Jamie has really been terrific. One, because he's great, and he's innovative, and he's brought a lot of different ideas and techniques to the table. And two, because the process of telling the story really kind of begins for the last time in the editing room. And so what we really get to do is find out what the movie really is, and I'm kind of on that path right now. And so far he's been a great collaborator.
I live in Memphis, and I, you know, just think that the look of Memphis is really cool. Even though it wasn't Memphis, we made it look like Memphis, and I think the, you know, art department and production designer, everybody did a great job to really make this look like Memphis. And we didn't really have any weak people on the show. Everybody was very professional and very good.
It sounds sappy, but when it's over and saying goodbye, you get really, because you spend so much time with people, you become a tight-knit family. So you become very attached to people, and it's very familiar. And then when you have to say goodbye, you're like, ah. I go through a little postpartum phase. So, you know what, that will be the hardest thing, as cheesy as it sounds, but because you make good friends, and then it's...
Well, we've been working so hard on this film. I mean, the crew, you know, all the cinema photographers, the set designers, you know, everybody on this shoot have been working so hard.
I had a great team. I had a fabulous assistant director, Robert Crippen. I had a great production designer, Eric Fraser. Tom Harding was the DP, and everybody kind of bonded and really found their stride in a good way.
You know, so it's been a wonderful time. I mean, everybody is here because they love their craft, they love what they do, and I think it's going to show up on screen.
Like I said, he's a legend. He's a movie star. I mean, his action movies when I was growing up were cool. Like, you would sit there and just rewind over and over again of him snapping somebody's arm and go, oh! Yeah, there's really nobody like him.
There's a lot of facets to Steven Seagal, and I have so much respect for him as a businessman, you know, as a producer. You know, he's directed, he's written this film.
Well, discipline, I think, is a key word for somebody like Steven. You gotta have a discipline to write. You gotta have a discipline to learn the martial arts, but you have the discipline to act, to make films, and to play guitar. It's all a discipline.
There was a message in it. I guess it'd be, you know, it takes time to really listen to each other a little bit more and make it more about getting something done than the egos.
Just get a hold of what's going on. Get a hold of your own darkness and really take a look at yourself. Because what happens is that people lose touch of their sense of self, and they get off in their minds and their heads, and they start to think weird things and do weird things. And it's not, I mean, people like to think it's far, but it's not really that far, the degree to which people can be pushed.
What happens to us in childhood shapes a lot of who we become as adults, and it's a question of how we deal with what happened to us that really decides what kind of adult we become.
Being a homicide detective is not pretty. Finding dead bodies and working with forensics to figure out who killed them and how they died and all that stuff, it's morbid and ugly and terrible. And it's a slice of life, I think.
Well, it sickens me to think that human beings can be that way, but the unfortunate reality is that there are human beings who are that way. And in this story, we find victory over those people, those types of evil spirits or disturbed individuals who unfortunately infect our society all too often, too severely. And the great thing about Stevens films are the good guys win.